All right, aloha again, everyone, and mahalo for taking part in our overview of the Huliau Climate Literacy Project. So first of all, an overview of what we do at Maui Huliau Foundation. We are a nonprofit dedicated to promoting environmental literacy and leadership among Maui's youth ages 12 through 18. We serve youth at all schools on the island of Maui and also on Molokai. We have 5 main programs that started in 2010. We have our filmmaking program that works with youth from all different schools, making all kinds of student films, from documentaries to music videos. We have a leadership program for high school students that meets monthly and plans different leadership and service projects for other youth. We have our Huliau Green Events program. If any of you have seen our zero waste stations at some of the large events on Maui, we help divert over 80% of waste from the landfill through education, waste reduction, recycling, composting, etc. We also have our alumni-run Huliau Eco Adventure Summer Camp that's open to students entering 7th through 9th grade that happens every summer and is planned by our college-age alumni. And then lastly, we have our Climate Literacy Project, which is what we are talking about today. This program began in 2017. It has since served over 1,000 students at 5 different schools. The purpose of the program is to assist mostly science teachers in grades 8 through 12 in bringing hands-on NGSS-aligned climate science into their classrooms. One thing that's unique about this program is that we actively involve teachers in the development and improvement of this program. Our latest attempt at doing that even more effectively is using Google Classroom, which I think many of you use. We've just launched that, and so we're actually going to be encouraging everyone who takes part in this webinar to join and be able to help us improve the program, ask questions, things like that. So we'll be talking about that more next. We also have a field trip that we have designed for this program. And next year, we are hoping to help a lot more with student-led projects that are related to solutions to climate change. So our Google Classroom that we just set up is divided into 3 units, and these units are divided into parts. So Unit 1 focuses on causes, Unit 2 impacts, and Unit 3 solutions. One overall note about the activities is that some of them are modified by us or created from scratch by us, and other ones are existing activities from all different sorts of sources. We use a lot of NOAA data. We use also full NOAA activities like NOAA data in the classroom, some things from all different sources. So we do in the instructions go over what the source is for each of these activities. So in each of these sections, so this is like zooming up on Unit 1, which is causes, you'll see that each part has a Google slide deck that can be modified. It has any activities that are included in that part, any teacher instructions, answer keys, and essentially anything else you would need for that unit. Also in Google Classroom, you can ask questions or make comments about different individual units, which is another reason that we're excited to start using Google Classroom. So this is what one of our slide decks looks like. You can copy this slide deck, this Google slide, and then modify it so you can remove some of the slides if you want less slides. You can change out images that are on the slides. There's also teacher notes on all of the slides. And then we also just created these teacher instructions. So for each unit, there is a Google Doc of teacher instructions, and it basically walks you through the entire unit, like how the slide decks relate to the activities, what the sources for the activities, any notes we have, whether there's teacher instructions. As you can see, sometimes we also will have teachers who have submitted like alternate worksheets, and we'll share those. It also lists all the NGSS standards that are associated with each unit. Now we're going to move on to an overview of each unit, starting with Unit 1, which focuses on causes. Part 1 focuses on the carbon cycle and how humans have changed the carbon cycle. There's a couple of activities here. One is called Carbon Sinks and Sources, and it's a bunch of like visuals of different things that absorb carbon from the atmosphere or release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And sometimes we do this as like a competition between groups of students, and we tell them to sort them into 2 piles. And it's just like a kind of fun activity for visual learners to better understand carbon sinks and sources. We also have our carbon journey activity where you set up different stations around the classroom that have these different cards. And round one is basically the carbon cycle before human activity. And then the second one is after humans started burning fossil fuels, deforestation, things like that. And so the students roll dice and they move around the room, and they're basically a carbon molecule on this journey, and they see the difference between round one and round two. Part two focuses on CO2 in the atmosphere. And we have this activity focusing on the Keeling curve using data from Mauna Loa CO2 data. And each student basically does a graph of a 3-year period. And then we end up connecting these all together somewhere in the classroom. And we come back to this graph in Unit 3 when we start talking about what we can do about the growing amount of CO2 in our atmosphere. This activity studies where the seasonal fluctuations in CO2, how do those occur? What is the overall trend of CO2 in our atmosphere? Different questions like that. There's also a very cool NASA video where students can visualize the seasonal fluctuations in the atmosphere. Part 3 focuses on weather and climate. We find that it's very hard to teach kids about climate change if they don't understand what climate is or how climate is different than weather. We've created this fun deck of like flashcards that you can also do as sort of a game that's different statements about weather and climate for students to be able to tell the difference. There's also this other activity, Climate Around the World, is an activity we haven't actually done in classrooms before, but I know a lot of science teachers, especially 8th grade earth science teachers, already have existing activities that introduce students to what is climate, what are the factors that influence Earth's climate. So really any activity that focuses on those things is recommended as part of Unit 1. So Unit 2 focuses on impacts, so all of the many impacts from climate change, both globally and locally. So in part 1, we start with kind of what seems to be the most logical for students, like when it gets hot, things melt. And that's sort of our starting point is melting ice and sea level rise. So we do a demonstration. This has since been replaced. These are lots of old classroom photos, but this has since been replaced with some better visuals for this. But it's basically a demonstration that shows students land ice versus sea ice melting and how they influence sea level rise. And then there's another activity where they compare Alaskan glaciers before and after pictures of Alaskan glaciers. Part 2 is definitely the largest part of any of the units in the program, and it focuses on ocean impacts. Being here in Hawaii, we feel like ocean impacts are really important for students to learn about. There's also a lot of interest in the ocean. There's a lot of interest in coral. Coral, of course, is a very, very important creature as well as being very culturally important here in Hawaii. So we do a lot of focusing on coral for this unit. So there's actually a part 2A and a part 2B of this, and 2A focuses on coral bleaching. One is an activity that talks about where corals are found, what they need to survive, basically looking at comparing different maps of corals around the world and things like sea surface temperature, water depth, things like that. Another activity that we created using NOAA sea surface temperature data focuses on the coral bleaching that occurred in Hawaii and all around the world in 2015, and having students calculate degree heating weeks and seeing how scientists predict coral bleaching in real life. And then we have these coral transects, which are actually printed versions that we created from NOAA data in the classroom. And this is a way for students to look for visual signs of coral bleaching. So they actually analyze different reefs and how bleached they are, and that kind of helps them get the visual aspect of what does coral bleaching actually look like. The second part, focusing on ocean acidification, we have this kind of fun lab with straws where students get to see how CO2 from their breath can make the indicator solution become more acidic. And that becomes a good segue into seeing how CO2 in our atmosphere can make our ocean more acidic. There's also a second part of the ocean acidification activity that is showing how acids affect calcium carbonate and the availability of that for coral to be able to build their shells, and of course other creatures that build calcium carbonate shells. Then we have our extreme weather unit, and the main activity here, this is going to be slightly revised coming up this next year, but the activity that we currently have looks at NOAA data from different tide stations around the world during storm events and also during a perigean spring tide in Hawaii. And it looks at basically how sea level rise, storm surge, moon phases, all of those things can create what we call the perfect storm. And so they look at real life storm events. Like this is a picture of Hurricane Sandy. And then we have a collection of different storm videos so the students can see what these storms looked like in real life. They're also working on a part 4 for this unit that will go over some other additional impacts that aren't covered in the previous units. So part 3 focuses on solutions to climate change. This is the unit that we have done the most revisions on this past school year, and we plan to do some more revisions this for the rest of 2020. Part 1 focuses on carbon footprint. We use an online footprint quiz to help students figure out the different factors that influence their carbon footprint and how many Earths they would need if everyone on Earth lived just like they do. Part 2 is focuses on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So these are 17 interrelated goals to be achieved by 2030 as part of the UN's mission to reduce poverty and inequality and protect the environment. A lot of them have very obvious connections to climate solutions. So in part 3 of this unit, we have an activity that has students create a concept map connecting their chosen climate solution to these sustainable development goals. This part of the unit just focuses on introducing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In the slide deck for this unit, it focuses on the Paris Climate Agreement, air pollution in China and India, and kind of making this argument that in addressing climate change, we can also create a cleaner, more equitable, and just world for everyone. That being said, this is one of the least science-focused parts of the program. One thing we've had teachers do, there was a group at Kihei Charter School that was working on a plan for this to create a cross-curricular climate change unit. So you could partner with a teacher in another subject that could teach this maybe in one of the social sciences, or you can just use the slide deck, which can be a 5 to 10 minute lecture portion that's basically introducing the Paris Climate Agreement and sort of the global picture of what it looks like to address climate change. The activity in this unit focuses on assigning each student or pair of students one of the SDGs, and they are given a cartoon infographic that talks about that sustainable development goal and a worksheet that helps them create a presentation for the class. So this is sort of an optional activity that relates to part 3. So in part 3, we focus on having students choose a climate solution that is interesting to them. We use, if anyone's familiar with Project Drawdown, it began, I believe, in 2014 originally. They published a book in 2017, and it's a nonprofit group of scientists that is attempting to rank the top 80 solutions to climate change. And these range for everything from renewable energy, kind of as you might imagine, to educating women, to reduced food waste. So what's really kind of cool about this activity is that students are able to pick a solution that is interesting to them. And then the back of this card you see in the middle here has just basic information from the Project Drawdown website about that solution. And then they're able to take the sustainable development goals and create a concept map of how their solution relates to those sustainable development goals. And we also have a student worksheet that kind of guides them through this process. And then they're able to present this to the class. And a lot of the solutions in Project Drawdown are what's called no regret solutions, meaning that aside from their impact on climate change, they also have other positive social or economic or environmental benefits. So they all seem to link very well to the Sustainable Development Goals. This also is another thing that we ask in the worksheet to the students is whether they feel that this solution can be applied locally here in Hawaii. It's also a great starting point for students thinking about student-led projects. When we did this as a pilot project with a class at Kekaulike, a lot of great student questions came out about how this could apply to solutions on Maui. And then our last unit focuses on what does the science say. So this basically focuses on how do scientists study Earth's past climate. So one example activity is having students look at these recreated ice cores. This activity takes a lot of prep, I have to warn you. It's made from a whole bunch of old Pringles containers and involves like freezing different levels of ice for multiple days. The point is to get students to see an example of how scientists study proxy data or data from Earth's past to understand what Earth's past climates might have looked like. And then the other portion of it focuses on why do people disagree and sort of the whole climate science denial that we have seen and the climate science being politicized. And one activity focuses on, it's called Fact or Fiction. It's adapted from Project Learning Tree, and it looks at different statements and whether they're supported by science or not supported by science. There's also a video that we use throughout the program called Our Climate, Our Future, and it's created by ACE, for Alliance for Climate Education. And they have a great 40-minute video that's broken down into chapters, and they have a really good chapter on this concept of like why do people not believe in climate change. There's also a lot of cool student discussion activities. ACE has one of these that goes with their video where students can discuss their own thoughts on these issues. There's one focusing on how to talk to others about climate change. There's also just a lot of great possibilities for leading your own student discussion, especially since with the COVID-19 outbreak, we've seen a little bit of this discussion of people denying science that might be an interesting tie-in to the science of climate change and what are the psychological reasons why humans don't want to believe it sometimes. All right, so that is all of our 3 units. And lastly, we're going to talk about our field trip and student-led projects. This last semester, we designed a field trip that unfortunately the first in-person field trip we were going to do got canceled due to COVID-19. But the field trip focuses on coral health, especially in this era of climate change. What are things that we can do to protect coral? We are partnering with Maui Ocean Center and the Marine Institute, hands-on activities that we can do there at their site that focus on coral diversity, identifying different coral species, students actually being able to do a hands-on fragmentation exercise with the Marine Institute, showing how we can help coral reproduction, how we can help protect native corals, some very, very interesting stuff around coral health. This is a great one to do after Unit 2, which focuses on these, or after the entire program is done. So that is one thing we hope to be offering in fall. Another thing is student-led projects. So as I had mentioned with Project Drawdown, we found some really great student questions came out of doing that activity. So there's several possibilities here. It could come out of investigating a local solution that comes from Project Drawdown, such as we had some students asking questions about whether some of the drawdown solutions relating to cattle ranching would be viable in Hawaii. And so one idea was to interview local ranching experts about these solutions. Another idea would be, for example, to try to assess how much food is wasted in the school cafeteria and how that might be able to be reduced, because that's another drawdown solution. Another option is to do service projects, either on or off campus, such as tree plantings. One effort that is happening that's led by Sierra Club and several partner organizations on October 30th is called Re-Tree Hawaii. I have the website up right here. And basically it's a statewide tree planting that they are trying to organize on a single day. And they're looking for teachers that want to plant trees either on or off their campus on that day or around that day. So that's another option. There's also tons of opportunities for exploring students' own feelings about climate change and what it means to be a young person right now in this age. And so there's a lot of things that you can do around climate activism. You've probably all heard of Greta Thunberg at this point, art, creative writing. So there's a lot of different projects that you can do. Next year, we are hoping that our focus with this program will be to mostly help with field trips, with some of the Unit 3 activities, and with student-led projects. Because we've run a leadership program for years now and several other youth-led efforts, that is the area where we can be the most helpful, in that we have a lot of experience overseeing student-led projects, not letting students take on too much, and putting them out there working with experts and program partners where they can see that they can actually bring about positive change in real life in our community. So anyways, feel free to contact us about those possibilities. And then lastly, we just wanted to point out that we have some other resources available for teachers. If you go on our website, we also have other resource collections for teachers, such as the CLEAN Network, if anyone's ever heard of that, NOAA Data in the Classroom. So there's a few collections of resources that are really, really amazing. We also have a whole section on climate change videos, including films that have been made through our student filmmaking program. And then there's a third section on teacher professional development, so courses and different free resources where teachers can learn more about climate change. And then we would also like to encourage you, as I said before, to join our Google Classroom. There's the join code there. You need to have a Gmail account, and it doesn't seem like the ones that you might have with your school's domain will let you connect to the Google Classroom. We had one teacher try it out that wasn't able to connect, so you might have to use a personal Gmail for that. But if you can join our Google Classroom, that's how we hope to be able to share different updates that we release on the program, have teachers be able to ask questions, share different worksheets. We are kind of new to Google Classroom, so we also appreciate any advice that you guys have for those of you that have used it more. And then lastly, I just want to say, feel free, that is my email. Feel free to reach out and email us. We would love to help you design a custom curriculum plan for next year. This can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months long, helping you align that with whatever curriculum requirements you have at your school. We are also willing to come teach some of the sessions directly to students, especially a couple of the choral activities in Unit 2 and a lot of the Unit 3 activities, and then helping you to coordinate field trips, student-led projects. So please be in touch with us, and that is it, and we're going to open it up for questions. Mahalo for joining us.